Okay, our next speaker is Meg, and I met her about 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago. She was one of the first ladies that Curtis said, oh, I got a speaker for you, and I'm like, okay, let's meet. And it's amazing to meet her because she lives in the town that my dad grew up in, and my grandparents live there, and she's a native of Montrose. She talks to everybody, especially the younger generation, about the red flags and making sure that you do not get into a relationship of domestic violence. She's getting ready to launch her first book, and she is the mother of 2. Would you please welcome Meg?
Thank you, Tawny.
You're welcome. You got this.
All right. Gonna have to use the podium a little bit, so we don't mind. Didn't know we were having the microphone, but so good morning, everyone. From the outside, everyone thought my life was perfect. When I was getting divorced, everyone kept asking me, why are you leaving? You have a brand new house on this big hill. You have 3 fancy cars. You have incredible children. I would agree. I had incredible children. I love my kids. I love spending time with them. I have a daughter, Gracie, and she's my youngest, and then my son, Dakota. And when they're around, my life is good. I think of them as my little happy pills. I just enjoy spending time with them. And so life wasn't always that good, though. In 2020, I was planning to end everything. My name is Meg, and let me take you back there. So 3 years ago, I was in a very dark place. I'd been in an abusive relationship for 7 years with a man I'd only dated about 6 months. I met him in 2013, and when I interviewed to be his personal assistant. In May of 2013, we began dating, and I thought he was everything that I had been missing in my relationship with my ex-husband. He was smart, he was ambitious, he loved to talk, which my ex-husband didn't ever want to talk with me, and it was like a whirlwind. We went places. Our business was thriving. Fancy restaurants. Went to Las Vegas. Went to California a lot of times. On the weekends when we had our kids, we were the carnival parents. I'm sure the other people really appreciated that, but it was everything was going good. And somewhere in that whirlwind, I missed out that I was becoming isolated from everyone. Over this time period, I just basically only interacted with our coworkers, which was his friends. So in December of that year, when he said it was okay for me to go home, I was ecstatic. I wanted to go home with my kids and just be away from him for one. But I wanted to go and see my family. I was a very family-oriented person before that. And so I was looking forward to it, and I thought I would do everything right. I knew there were a lot of hurdles that were going to happen over that weekend, but I was just going to make it work. Over that weekend, I answered the 40-plus calls and texts that he sent. I came back on time. I even tried to act like I was excited and happy to be back when I got back. But that wasn't enough, because little did I know before I left that weekend, he had installed the cameras and a tracker on my car and spyware on my phone. So boy, was I in for a surprise when I came inside the house. I remember barely taking off my shoes, and he started wailing his arms and coming towards me and asking, who is Jay, and why does he care if you got home safely and on time? I honestly had no idea what was happening. I didn't know about any message. He had a big thing with cell phones. If you were looking at your cell phone or talking on your cell phone, who are you talking to? Even my kids, it was a big jealousy thing. So I just put the cell phone away before I even came in the door. I had never seen the message. But because he had the spyware, he had seen the message, and he just kept insisting. First, he started throwing things around the house, took apart my bag, everything was all over at the house. Then he started throwing me around the house. Even when he decided to punch me in the face, I still had no idea what he was talking about. But I knew that that first night that everything was wrong. I knew that something wasn't right, and even though I hadn't been able to identify it before, at that point in time, I realized that this was not really a relationship for me. That night lasted about 5 hours. It was the first time I'd ever been physically assaulted. But again, I knew that then and there that I wanted to get away from him. For the next year and a half, I would try to leave. I tried to leave the relationship. I tried to physically get away from him. But every once in a while, he lured me in, either with promises of paying me my back pay, about $30,000, or he would threaten my child, my oldest son, who's about 18, with harm. Every time I went back and tried to leave, it got a little bit worse. On the first occasion, we met at a fancy hotel, and the next morning I said, I'm going to take a shower, and then I'm going to go home. I had moved home. And he said, well, you could stay for breakfast, right? Sure, I'll stay for breakfast. While I was in the shower, he had drugged my breakfast, I guess hoping that I would wreck my car on the way out. But instead, I went face first into the asphalt in the parking lot and busted my chin open to the bone. I drove to the doctor's office. At the doctor's office, they took me in the ambulance and sent me to the emergency room. My parents met me there. The doctors pleaded with me, tell us what happened. Just tell us what happened. What happened to you? It's not normal for a young girl just to have a seizure and go black out in the middle of the morning. He was still texting while I was in the hospital, and I was scared to death of what else he would do if I decided to tell them what happened. So I kept silent. I moved into the first safe house after an ATF agent who I finally connected with told me about, he had confirmed two things. He confirmed first that he had been an enforcer for the Hells Angels. He was an ex-convict, belonged to another gang. And then secondly, that he had actually been able to say that, yes, there's spyware on your phones and your cameras, or your phones and your laptop, and this is very dangerous. About 3 months into the safe house, I was exiting to give my daughter back to my ex-husband, and I looked out and he was breaking into my car. I was moved. I lived in 3 safe houses, 4 apartments. I had 4 different vehicles, 12 different phones, and 4 laptops. No matter what I did, no matter what I replaced, he always found me. And when he didn't find me, he hired a private investigator. And the guy posed as a DA investigator and told my parents that he needed to know where I was located at for the trial. Needless to say, the guy was a little obsessive. He was obsessed with hidden cameras, tracking devices, and also with spyware. So we had hidden cameras in my homes and my cars, tracking devices, and of course on the car, and then the spyware on my phones and laptops. Spyware, if you're not familiar with it, is something that can basically control your device, see whatever you're doing on your device, read, delete things, forward things. He would unblock his number so his phone calls would come through in the middle of the night. He took over everything. They listened to everything I did. He even knew to turn on the camera and record when I was using my device and take pictures of me unknowingly. He added creepy songs to my music playlists, and while I was driving, the songs would suddenly pop up. He would disconnect my calls when I was talking to people from the safe house or to my family. I had him arrested over a dozen times in 4 different counties, but he always managed to get away quickly and get out of the jail quickly, and then the torture would resume. I was hypervigilant, extremely hypervigilant. I lived in fear, and I didn't get much sleep. I was always afraid that he'd break in, and then that's when he'd harm me. I saw counselors and therapists everywhere I moved all over the state, multiple times a week, but nothing helped. I had 20 plus prescriptions for everything from anxiety to depression to the PTSD. Again, nothing helped. And so I began coping in some other way that I thought would numb the pain. I turned to alcohol, I turned to drugs, I did just about anything that I thought would take away what was happening to me. But he kept reminding me that no matter where I went, no matter where I've hid, that he would be able to find me, and he'd get to me 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, in my homes, in my cars, and even in the safe houses. In August of 2019, I decided to move home. I was going to be my final move. I had moved 7 times over the 7 years. This would be my final move. And so before I left that place, I sold everything. I kept 2 pillows, my toiletries, and some clothes. I had a table that I had gotten with my ex-husband that set 12 people. I was very proud of that table. And so I kept that and a painting for my kids. Just in case, if anything happened, they would have something to, in their homes when they were older. So I've told you a lot of crazy things that happened, but just imagine for a minute that for 7 years, every single day and every single moment, there's no peace. There's no privacy. You never know where the cameras are. You never know if someone's going to jump out at you. Someone looking at your devices, hacking into all your accounts. And the one that always creeped me out was when you're getting undressed or when you shower and not knowing where that video is going. Over the years, I'd written many letters because every day would escalate, and I wouldn't know whether I'd be surviving, another day or another week. And so I'd written a lot of letters to my kids. But after I moved home, I got a tape recorder, the old-fashioned kind, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, so it couldn't be hacked. And I left special memories for my kids. I told them, please move on. Please move on after this. Don't be angry. Don't hold on to the anger. Don't go down this slippery slope that I've gone down. Just move on. This is all I wanted for them. In March of 2020, I sat outside looking up at the drone that had moved in shortly after I had made that move. I looked at the blinking lights, tears rolling down my face, and I forced this smile up at it. I looked it directly in the eyes, and I waved a little goodbye because I was done. That was going to be the end. And I knew that the craziness would finally be over. That night when I went to bed, I took the loaded gun that I slept with every night under my pillow, put the safety back on, and put it in a drawer. I locked the doors, but I didn't put back the little things under the door wedges, or the alarms. I went to bed that night and I slept. I slept very peacefully. The next morning, COVID hit. Nothing like a pandemic to ruin your plans of death. Everything with death was surrounding me. My focus, I was totally distracted. My kids went to school. One of my oldest worked. My mom, my dad, everyone went out of the home. I basically hadn't worked for years. I hadn't been able to leave my house for a lot of time. And so I was very distracted by this. And something else happened. For the second week, it all stopped. I woke up the one morning, my text messages weren't read. There were no hundreds of phone calls that day. And even the drone had moved away. I didn't quite know what to think of it, really. Honestly, I was like, what kind of game is he playing now? Like, I don't know. I couldn't take it for the good things that was happening. But after about a month, even my kids could see the difference. Like, I stopped crying every day. I wasn't so anxious. And by May of that year, instead of checking myself into an institution, I decided to do yard work. Summer is my favorite month. Summer is my favorite season. And so I indulged in the yard work. I did yard work 10 hours a day. I soaked up the sun. By the end of the summer, I took this deep breath. I hadn't taken a deep breath in years because of all the anxiety and all the emotions that are pent up inside me. And by December, I decided I could be part of society again. Like, I wanted to do something, but I wanted to do something that would help people. I didn't just want to go back to being a top salesperson or a manager or, any of those kind of things. I didn't care about the money. What I wanted to do was do something good. So I began studying digital forensics because that was a very frustrating part of my life in doing this whole thing. Was that not only people are trained in digital forensics or deeply in it. A lot of people think, oh, this sounds like a sci-fi movie that you're talking about. This is not real. And so you felt very alone as a victim. So I wanted to assist victims and help them, not feel so alone, and even help law enforcement, just to give them a nudge saying, this is really easy to do. Like, this isn't as far-fetched as you might think. I contacted my local safe house and asked them, hey, is there anything I can do to volunteer for anything I can do to help other victims? And so the lady said, oh yeah, sure, we can train you. You can become a volunteer. So I've been volunteer for one of the crisis lines. And after a few months, I decided I wanted to reach out a little bit further. And I reached out to the first safe house that I lived in, because those people had helped me immensely and even carried on for years after I left there. They also said, we can train you. You can become a safe house, or you can become a volunteer. So about 4 days a week, I volunteer as a crisis line, on the crisis line, helping people on the other end go through some of the things I went through. I did about 6 semesters of digital forensics, and I kind of came to the conclusion that it's not as easy. I wasn't going to be helping a lot of people because the investigations took a long time. As a victim, I had explored the option of getting the evidence because I had all these devices with all this evidence, but no one would collect it for me. And it's a very expensive procedure. And most victims don't run around with $15,000 or $20,000 per device. So it could be a lucrative career for me, but I didn't see it fulfilling me and giving me that thought that I was going to be able to help a lot of people. I looked back on my experience and I wondered what had happened. Every year I was like, why is this happening to me? How come this happened? How did this happen? And I'd met lots of women, I would say hundreds of women. Even now, as I network, I meet women that were victims. And most people, like myself, don't recognize the early signs of abuse until it becomes physical, which kind of feels like it's a little too late. And so I figured out a way to help people. I know that 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 4 men will experience violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. That dating violence is more prominent than spousal abuse, and that girls ages 16 to 25 experience violence at the highest rate of any population. Violence and stalking. Because of my experience, I decided to start a nonprofit called Dating Tips by Meg, where I go and talk to high schools and college girls and give them the early signs of abuse, the red flags, the warning signs, the things that I didn't see all leading up to the physical violence, in hopes that I can prevent violence from happening to them. Because if people, their first experience is a violent one or an abusive one, they're likely to repeat that, twice as likely to repeat that throughout their lifetime. So hoping to catch them in the beginning and make sure that they kind of have their heads up and they kind of recognize, oh, I want healthy relationships, and this is what an unhealthy relationship looks like. I'm very grateful to be here today. I didn't ever really think I would be surviving. This all started when my daughter was 9 years old, and I never thought I'd see her graduate. I'd recorded many videos many letters to her, like, you can do this. When my son had graduated the year I left. And I'm proud of the person that came from that darkness. I'm a kinder person. I'm a lot more understanding of people. I'm just going to say this and I hope don't offend anyone if you wear your pajamas to Walmart. That when I see those people wearing their pajamas to Walmart, all I think is, that was you some days at City Market. You barely got dressed and you were crying every time before you paid the person. All you had to do is get your prescriptions and get out of there. But that was me. And so I always look at people and say, you don't know what they're going through. And then lastly, I feel so blessed to have found my purpose, to be able to share with people my experience, my story, and then hopefully it'll help people and prevent violence from happening to them. Thank you.
Wow.